Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Governance and Audit Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Justin Wrench and I will be chairing this meeting. As this is the first meeting of the year, I would like to wish all members and officers a very happy new year. I would also like to welcome Councillor Mrs Cunningham, as this is her first meeting of the committee, and I would also like to welcome Aphrodite Lefebvre, who joins us as the Director from BDO, and also Sebastian Evans, who will be joining us online, who also works for BDO. So I shall now, just before I do proceed for the business of the meeting, I'd just like to remind members that this meeting is being broadcast on the Council's YouTube channel. So can I please ask everyone to turn off their microphones when they have finished speaking. So I will now proceed to the business of the meeting, and agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. I've not received any apologies this evening. However, I'm aware I've just received a late message from Councillor Raymond, who should be with us within about 10 minutes, so he'll be joining us shortly. I will now proceed to agenda item 2, declarations of interest. So do members have any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest, or non-pecuniary interest that they wish to declare this evening? Okay, so as there are no declarations, I'll now move on to agenda item 3, which are the minutes of the previous meeting. So please can I have a proposer to approve the minutes as an accurate record of the meeting of the Governance and Audit Scrutiny Committee of the 3rd of November? Oh, thank you, Councillor Euston. And could I also have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mann. So the minutes have been moved and seconded as an accurate record. All those in favour, please show with a show of hands. Thank you, members. The minutes are approved. Thank you. So members, I can confirm that there are no registered speakers for this evening's meeting for public question time. So I'll now proceed to agenda item 5 to approve the statement of accounts for the financial year 2020-21. So members, this report is set out as item on pages 6 to 53 of the agenda, and I would like to welcome as I already have Aphrodite today, but before I ask her to present her report, I would like to ask Mark Jarvis, our Financial Services Manager, to set out the report. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, Councillors. The first report is obviously to approve and finalise the Council's statement of accounts for the 2021 financial year, and obviously to receive the audit completion report from BDO. So as part of the report, there is a link to our draft statement of accounts. However, this does not include any of the proposed amendments as part of the completion report. Once we have a final report, obviously, those changes will be included as part, or any change will be included as part of that report. Now, obviously, it's been quite a while since we actually signed the accounts, so if I just go through some of the timeline of events. So a draft set of statement of accounts was originally signed on the 27th of July 2021 by then Chris Fleetham, our Section 151 and Corporate Director. This was representing a true and fair view of the Council's financial position at reporting date. Following that, the accounts were made available for public inspection between the 2nd of August and the 13th of September, and obviously there was no request received in respect to those accounts. As part of creating the 2021 accounts, there was no significant changes because obviously that was the global pandemic, and a lot of the changes that were proposed were postponed until latter years. The Council External Auditors, BDO, obviously commenced their final audit on the accounts in November 2021, and obviously today we've got that completion report as an appendix. The report highlights 3 unadjusted errors, which obviously we will not be adjusting in the accounts on the basis that obviously they're not material for the accounts, and obviously they do include a part of extrapolation. Also, as the audit is still subject to completion, there are still a number of areas identified on page 39 or page 48 of your packs, which are still being reviewed, and obviously BDO will be given a verbal update at the meeting. So obviously I'm happy to take any questions on the state of accounts or obviously the timeline of events. Otherwise I'll pass you over to Aphrodite.
So members, do any of you have questions for Mark at this stage? Okay, I'd like to now pass on to Aphrodite to present her report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. So we have prepared for you our audit completion report for the year ended March 2021. This report summarises the results of our work and presents matters that we want to bring to your attention. I will take this report as read, but I will provide a brief run through of some matters. So if we go on to page 13 of the pack, that's page 4 of our report. I'll use the pack page numbers. This provides a summary explaining that our audit is substantially completed. There are some outstanding matters that are included on page 48 for your information. Some of them have moved on since the drafting of the report, but subject to the successful resolution of those matters, we anticipate being able to issue our clean audit opinion within the next few weeks. A key outstanding, as you will be aware, is the sign-off of the 1920 audit opinion, which is still open following issues in relation to the valuation of infrastructure assets. I believe this was communicated to you at the last meeting. However, following that, anticipated consultations have now taken place, and a bulletin to support local authorities in relation to this issued by CITFA was released yesterday, and I believe there is a webinar taking place next week to provide some guidance and support with the implementation of those changes. So I anticipate following that we should be able to complete the 1920 audit by the end of January, which will then allow us to finish the 2021 audit. Our work on the value for money conclusion is in progress. However, we have no matters to bring to your attention at this point based on the work we've done to date, and completion of this work will follow the sign-off of the financial statements, and in line with the requirements, the auditor's annual report, which includes the commentary that we issue on value for money, will be issued within 3 months of us signing the audit opinion. Page 14 sets out the materiality that we have used, and then page 15 confirms to you that there are no matters to report in relation to financial reporting. We confirm our independence on that page as well, and draw attention to the letter of representation, which is attached at the end of our report. I'd just like to add, the letter of representation is a standard template, so we haven't added anything specific to it. We also ask that if there is any knowledge of fraud, that you please make us aware if you haven't already. Page 16 sets out the risks that we had identified, and these were reported within our audit plan. We haven't identified any new risks, so the work we've done was in relation to those risks. And this page also gives you a summary of the errors that we have found, and as you can see, there have only been errors in the valuation of non-current assets and on the expenditure recognition risk. So specifically on the valuation of PPE, we identified a net overstatement of £151,000, which we consider to not be material, and we've included that in our errors page on page 32. On the expenditure, as part of cut-off testing that we performed, we identified 3 instances of invoices that spanned 2 years. However, the expense was recognised in the audit year in question. Although the actual amounts are very small, due to the way that we perform our work, we have to extrapolate those errors, and that's led to an error of £282,000, which is therefore included in our error of unadjusted misstatements. Our work on the other 2 risks did not identify any errors that need to be brought to your attention. So if we skip on to page 29, this sets out the changes made in the draft accounts since they were published, which are in relation to the pensions disclosure following receipt of more up-to-date information. And then pages 22 to 24 show the uncorrected errors, and I'd like to add that we are content with the decision not to adjust those errors on the basis of materiality. Page 38 sets out some control deficiencies. However, we do not consider those to be significant. Those are the main points I wanted to highlight in our report, but I'll be very happy to take any questions. Thank you. Can I add, I have actually got my colleague Sebastian on virtually as well, so he is here to answer any questions of detail, if any of you have any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you would like to reference any of the answers for Sebastian, please just let me know, and I know he can hear us now, so feel free to join in, Sebastian. So members, do anybody have any questions? Councillor Eusden.
No, thank you, Chair. I was just confused about revenue and expenditure problem that you identified, which you said was a small amount, but you've extrapolated it up to 282,000. And I wonder how you get from a small amount to 282,000 like that. It was pretty impressive. And could you do it to my bank account, please? Thank you.
Yes, certainly. So, sorry, can I check if I'm speaking at the right volume? Is that fine? Thank you. Essentially, for our cut-off testing, and indeed all of the sample tests that we perform, we would generally look at a sample of transactions in relation to that particular risk, on the basis that depending on what the risk properties are of the particular balance being looked at, we would generally look at all material items, then only look at a sample of the smaller ones. Now, these three particular items were part of that sample, but because that sample is essentially any amounts paid by the council during the entire month of March 2021, that's essentially the field of transactions we're looking at. And so I think generally speaking, say for that period, I think we typically look at around 30 transactions of what is potentially around 3,000, i.e. roughly correlating to about 1% of the total items and value of that. And so whilst obviously we only whilst only testing, say 1% of that population, we are confident enough in the accuracy of our sampling approach that actually we think we can extrapolate the results of that to assess the the overall potential error in that population, and it's on that basis it is essentially just a formula of what we have tested, extrapolate against those balances of a similar nature that we haven't tested, and that's how we get to our 282,000.
Thank you, Sebastian. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's just really a question for clarification on page 25 of the report about the issue of assessment of going concern. There's a reference to break even, and then there's a reference to budget gap. I don't quite understand the difference between break even and budget gap. And then I just want to make sure I understand the figures correctly, because it says there's an improvement that the budget gap has reduced from 1.6 to 1.2 million. So can somebody contextualise that apparent improvement of 400,000, and what's the difference between break-even and the budget gap?
I think certainly in terms of the first question, the break-even duty refers to the solely to the one-year projection, the 21-22 period, whereas the medium-term financial planning, the 1.6 million, 1.2 million refers to the four-year period, and so it's quite common in local authorities, I think, for there to be a longer-term gap over, say, a 4 or 5 year period, where, however, at the time of budget setting for the 1 year horizon, they are able to produce a break-even budget. In terms of the reasons behind the improvement from 1.6 million to 1.2 million, I may have to, I suppose, push that query, so I said back to management, just in terms of the overall context for that.
Okay, are you happy for that to be brought back, Councillor Walsh? Yeah, thank you. Councillor Mann.
I think this is quite a reassuring report from an independent source. Sort of phrases that we like to hear. Nothing found, nothing to report, no significant weaknesses. It does, okay, unadjusted errors considered sort of immaterial to the accounts, but it does seem to indicate that our internal processes are sound, and I think this acts as a verification of that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. I'd just like to pass over to Phil, who would be able to clarify a few points. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just back to Councillor Walsh's question about the 1.2 and 1.6. So, what you bear in mind, this is looking back some time now. So, if you recall that we previously had a budget gap projected of 1.6 million, and I don't know if you can remember, we had the sort of 1.6 million challenge that was launched by the Chief Executive around that and about addressing that position. When we came to do the budgeting at this time last year, we had actually made some inroads into addressing that gap. So the actual gap had actually dropped from the 1.6 million to 1.2 million. So we'd seen an improvement in terms of some of the work we'd done around the MTFS at that time. But as you'll know, the world hasn't stood still, and you'll be aware from some of the more recent presentations that have been made that that gap is now sort of going the other way because of the inflationary situation and the additional cost pressures that we're incurring. So, and that's what's been sort of wrapped up in the current budget process, as you know, and what would and probably making the challenge more difficult going ahead from here. So, and I'm sure that will be something that BDO will then pick up and look to see that we're addressing that position when they come to review the situation again.
I've just got a couple of questions myself, if that's okay. Firstly, it's positive news that the 1920 is likely to be completed by January, or end of January, should I say. So I'll be really looking forward to being able to see that one being signed off as soon as possible. With regards to the 2020-21, looking at the timetable, it still seems quite vague. So do we have any timescale, like predictability, when that could be completed? And I suppose, are we expecting any major changes from what we've seen already? Because from what we've read, everything, I echo Councillor Mann's points, everything reads very sound, very positive. Is there anything that could come out? And then my last question is around the housing benefit. Clearly, there are deadlines for the council with regards to that. So could I have a little bit of update on where we are with the housing benefit as well, if that's okay? Thank you.
Thank you. If I take the timetable question first, if we are able to conclude on the 1920 by the end of January, that will allow us to focus entirely on the 2021, and we should be able to conclude on that by the end of February. We have, as I said when I was going through the report, got a few outstandings that we still need to clear, but that does still give us 6 or so weeks to get that all concluded. So I anticipate that would be February. So in relation to the question on the benefits, we were hoping to conclude the grant certification work in December. However, we had to seek an extension, and we have obtained that to the end of January. And we anticipate being able to issue our qualification letter sometime in the next couple of weeks. But I'll defer to Sebastian to please correct me if I've given the incorrect date as a confirmed extension date.
So I don't have the confirmed
We seem to have lost Sebastian currently, so we'll just see if he's connected.
progress on the work. We did substantively complete.
Sorry, Sebastian, you just cut out slightly there. Would you be able to start that again if possible? Thank you.
Absolutely. So I don't have sort of confirmation because the original extension date was to December. I will need to confirm the further extension to January. But in terms of the actual work, and I have updated the Housing Benefit Assessments team just in terms of the final steps. They've informed the DWP, and we are planning to get our draft qualification letter to to your team next week. As I said, the work is being completed and quality reviewed, so it is essentially those final steps.
Thank you. And if I can respond to the final question in relation to the accounts. There was the matter around pensions that was updated. I don't believe you've seen the update on that. It hasn't been published, has it? And a couple of sort of typos and grammatical errors, but nothing significant to change from the version that you have seen to the version that will be signed.
Okay, thank you very much. So, members, if there are no remaining questions, we are asked to consider 5 recommendations. So I don't intend to go through each recommendation in turn, and I would like to take them as a whole, unless anybody would like to take them individually. So they are set out on page 6, items 2.1 to 2.5. We are asked to approve these recommendations. So can I have a proposer to move the recommendations? Thank you, Councillor Mann. And could I have a seconder?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Raymond. So the recommendations have been moved and seconded, and I will now put this to the vote. So all those in favour, please indicate by a show of hands. Thank you, that is unanimous. So thank you, members. The recommendations have been approved, and I will now proceed to agenda item 6 to receive the suite of the Council's key financial indicators as of the 30th November 2022. Before I do, Aphrodite, you're more than welcome to stay, but if you would like to leave the meeting, you're more than welcome to as well. But thank you ever so much for coming in person this evening, and likewise thank you to Sebastian, who's joined us online, for answering the questions this evening as well. Thank you very much. Thank you. No, that's fine. So agenda item 6, I will invite, this is set out on pages, 54 to 59 of the agenda. So please can I invite Phil Myers, the Head of Finance, to set out his report.
Okay, yep, thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So this is the normal sort of report that the committee receives on a suite of key financial indicators. So the snapshot in this report was as at the end of November. So it covers a multitude of things. So in terms of budget position, it shows where we were at the end of November compared with where we would anticipate to be based on our profiled budgeting. What you can see is that in terms of our salary costs, staffing costs, we were actually over profile at the end of November by £129,000. That's not surprising given we had the pay award that was recently settled that was backdated to April 2022, and that was higher than the council had originally budgeted when it had set the budget for the year. So that the position is reflected there. In light of that extra pay award, there was a recovery plan process that was put in place across the organisation to try and mitigate that extra cost, and a lot of that mitigation has been quite successful. So the actual variance is probably not as great as one would have anticipated on the basis of the extra pay costs that we are incurring, which are around about £750,000. In terms of commercial rents, again, the position here is a little bit down from previous. You can see that our occupation level is around 90%, so it's a small dip from what we've been previously used to, and a bit of a shortfall in terms of the budget, in terms of the profile. The report does set out, though, that there is quite a bit of activity going on in terms of addressing that position. So we continue to actively market our units. Some of the issues are around some of the churn that we're seeing in some of our existing properties. So we've got the new Plaza where we're taking on new tenants, but we're also seeing some changes in the enterprise centre. You can see also that we're taking action around the empty space in terms of Causeway House. So we're looking to mitigate some of the reduction in service charge income that we're able to recover. And we are looking to relocate some of our staff from Unit 4 into Causeway House. I know the asset management team are also very proactive at the moment in terms of some of the lease rent reviews and some of the re-gearing of leases. So we'd hope that the position will improve going forward, but nevertheless, it is quite a hard market at the moment in terms of this area of activity. In terms of some of our other budgets, income budgets, so we're seeing some positive variances in terms of our income budgets. So we're seeing extra income around recycling material, building control licensing and treasury management, which is benefiting from some of the higher interest rates as interest rates have been increased. We've still got some areas where income is short, so car parking, which was hit quite hard in the COVID pandemic. We've still got some shortfalls in car parking, and planning applications are also, the planning application income is also down from where we would where we'd have expected at this point. In terms of some of the expenditure, naturally, we are being faced with extra costs through higher fuel and inflation costs, and that's particularly in the areas of our operational services. So that was the snapshot looking at the position as at the end of November against where we'd expect to be. Alongside that, we've done a review for the year and done a projection for where we think we will be at the end of the year. So that was reported to the Cabinet in December, and that showed that actually looking forward, we're expecting our financial position to improve, and we were projecting at that time a positive variance of 126,000. And a lot of that improvement will be as a result of income. In terms of capital programme, there's been a little bit of reprofiling of expected expenditure in the current year, so we're expecting to spend around £11 million or just over. We've actually spent at the end of November £6 million, and you can see some of the major areas of the expenditure that's in the programme set out there. Capital receipts are pretty much a similar position from what we reported at the last meeting of this committee. So, basically very positive against the position. We're expecting 5.7 million. We'd actually achieved slightly more than that, but some of that is around timing differences on capital receipts, because invariably things do change in that respect. So not much different from the last report. In terms of council tax collection, so council tax collection again just shy of where we were at the same time last year. So 75.4% against 75.7%. So maybe just some indicators of some of the impact of the cost of living on our taxpayers. So that said, we do benchmark favourably with our peers in Essex. So we are about fourth in terms of collection performance. Business rates is looking very positive at this stage. I think we just have to be a bit cautious here because business rates collection has been skewed in previous years by a lot of the COVID support that's been channeled through from government. So it's probably still early before we get a sort of a stable position in terms of business rates. Write-offs. I've just put some additional information into the report about write-offs because I know this was questioned at the last meeting. So we have seen a little bit of an upturn in write-offs, and I think some of this is a bit of a national trend around individual voluntary arrangements. So this is where people enter into an arrangement around repaying their debt. Once they've entered into that arrangement, it does actually stop us or preclude us from actually pursuing and taking any further recovery action. So we do take a bit of a worst case scenario. We write the debt off at that point, but we then do collect that debt in relation to the agreements that are made with the debtor and the sort of individual voluntary arrangement that they've agreed to. So we will see income still being collected against that debt. It's just it will be a gradual process. In terms of business rates, little change from what we'd expect there in terms of write-offs. In terms of sundry debts, again, the position there is pretty much as previously reported. As we've said before, much of the debt there relates to housing benefit overpayments, and we sort of continue to collect that again through steady payment instalments. Performance on supplier payments is good and above target. And in terms of our treasury management position, you could see a significant amount of income that we're now generating, particularly on our short-term investments, 458,000. So 1.4%, and that will only improve over the remainder of the year. And you'll see in the appendix there's a breakdown of our investments, and you'll see that a lot of our investments are sort of above 2%, and some of them are over 3%. So that performance will improve as we move forward, and that's part of that improved position in terms of the quarterly review. In terms of our pooled funds, so these are our long-term investments. Again, a reasonable return there, around about 4%. The value of those funds do fluctuate. So at the report at last September, we had seen a drop in those values, and that was a bit of market reaction to, if you recall, the mini budget at that time did cause a bit of turmoil in markets, and so the values of our funds likewise took a hit. But about £1 million of that has been recovered since, so we've got an unrealised gain of around £1.9 million. So I think that the detail is set out in the appendices. I think happy to take any questions on that, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor Mann.
Regular stuff there, thanks sort of very much. The relocation of staff from sort of Unit 4 back into, well, I say back, but into Causeway, that seems a pretty sort of sensible move. Is there any more scope for bringing back staff out of the cold and making better use of the space that we have got here?
I think the ones that are moving up are, I think there are some that will remain because of just the fact that operationally it makes sense that they still remain down at the depot. So I think as much as possible we are relocating the people from that area. So, I mean, we haven't really then got many other people elsewhere in other outstations, have we? You've got the vehicle workshop, but, they need to be there, and such as like the town hall and the like. So I think, that's probably as best as we can go for in terms of ourselves, but we are, still marketing actively the lettable space and still hope that we may get some tenants in that will pick up the slack that's in there.
Councillor Walsh.
Just a point of, again, of clarification as well, and I think I know the answer to this. On page 58, there's a very helpful summary, and the whole report's well set out and easy to understand. We list the main sources of income to our council as rental income, council tax and business rates. The reason I ask this question is some well-informed residents in my ward are surprised when I tell them we have no what used to be known as historic central government grants. I am right in saying that we have no other source of income from central government. All our income is basically earned either through rental, business rates and council tax. We have no money coming in as income from central government, whether in terms of general grant or projects or programme support, or do we?
We do still get some grant funds from government. So the main grant that authorities would traditionally got, which we don't really get, we get a very small amount, is the revenue support grant. So that used to be the main sort of unring-fenced grant that authorities receive from government. So that has been sort of effectively phased out for us. But I mean, we still get things like new homes bonus, and some specific grants, but they're given for to cover certain areas. So some of the housing benefit administration costs are partly covered by grants. So,
but not unallocated.
No. I mean, they're given usually for certain reasons. We do get some unring-fenced grants through the local government finance settlement. But fairly modest in relation to what we would have previously got under revenue support grant, many years ago. So,
thank you. That's what I thought.
Councillor Euston.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Phil, on page 55, 3.2.4, other controllable income budgets, it says controllable expenditure budgets, and we've lost some money from planning applications. And the first point is, I'm kind of curious as to why that is, because I seem to get a notification of yet another planning application every day. So there seems to be loads of them. Our friends in planning tell us they're up to their armpits, so how come revenue's going down? And my second point is further in the same paragraph, is that we've additional costs have been incurred at Horizon 120 and I Construct. Was that expected additional costs or unexpected? So was it, because of increase in fuel costs type of thing, or was there some other underlying cause there that we should have been aware of but weren't? Thanks.
So, so taking the planning, you're right. So planning income is really driven by often the type of planning. So you've got minor applications and major applications, and I think it's the major application bit that is down. So you're right. I think I've heard the same myself, that the volume of applications is still quite high, but it's the type of applications we're getting. So and it's the major ones that bring in the income. So we are down. So we're down on the income side on planning applications. But that said, I know there is additional income that's been generated. I think where they're doing the sort of performance, the planning performance agreement. So these are where they're signing up to providing us a service and agreeing some deadlines with the developer and that side of the income, we are actually seeing that they're actually overachieving, but it is the bulk of their budget is around the planning application income, and that is actually down. But in terms of the extra costs, so icon structure was really around energy costs. The energy costs at the icon structure are higher than we would previously anticipate, but that's probably no real different to what we're experiencing across the piece in a sense. Horizon 120, some of that is because we've got still some unsold plots. So the aim was to sell off the plots there. So where there are being costs incurred in terms of maintaining the business park, some of that is falling on us until such time those plots are sold, and then we would recover those through the sort of service charge arrangements that are in place.
So if there are no further questions, Councillor Raymond.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman. Phil, I have a question on page 56, paragraph 3.211 around business rates. There is a write-off of 59k for the financial year. Is there any voluntary arrangement for business rates, or is there any mechanism, if I put it rightly, to recover the lost or write-off business rates and the businesses who couldn't afford to pay their rates as a result of it? Could be pandemic or any other financial issues they faced during that business year?
Yes, so the write-offs there, as you say, I mean, it's spread, to sort of 33 sort of business premises. So that's often usually where the business has gone, into liquidation. That's usually the reason why we have to write off on business rates. So, where we can, we will work with businesses if they're struggling to pay and come to arrangements to pay, pay off what they can at a rate. So usually write-offs are the last sort of stage where we feel that there's no possibility of recovering that either because the business has gone into liquidation order. I mean, that's not to stop that, if that liquidation goes through and there are, the receiver or whatever is able to get some value out of the business, that we would lodge a claim like anybody else as a creditor, and if, hope that we might get some recovery back.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you. And Councillor Mrs. Cunningham.
Thank you, Chairman. Mine's page 59, just a little bit of clarification on the 650 write-offs of council tax, 126 in the current year and 524 in respect of previous financial years. Any idea how many years? What I'm trying to say is 126 about an average that we would normally write off every year, or?
Yeah, I mean, as you can see, the 120. So last year, at the same time, the equivalent last year, we had 142 write-offs last year, at November 21. So it's probably number-wise, it's slightly down on previously. I mean, in terms of the amount that we write off compared with the amount of debt collectible, and if you take into account, as you say, previous years as well, you're looking at debt going back over multiple years. It actually is a very small percentage of it, but I think it's this the involuntary, the individual voluntary arrangements that where we're seeing sort of more activity around write-offs. But as I said, whilst we take a worst case scenario approach and write the debt off once we get that IVA, the IVA is really there to put in place a payment plan. So we would sort of collect some debt beyond that, and if the IVA, if they falter on the IVA, then we would effectively restate the debt and then start our normal recovery action at that time, and then see where that would take us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, members. We're asked to note the Council's key financial indicators as of the 30th of November 2022. So can I take it that the report has been noted, and please indicate by a show of hands. Thank you, members. The report has been noted, and I will now proceed to agenda item 7, the draft Treasury Management Strategy for 2023-24. This report is set out on pages 60 to 77 of the agenda, so please can I invite Mark Jarvis, the Financial Services Manager, to set out his report.
Thank you, Chair. This report is for the committee to review the Treasury strategy for the forthcoming year. The draft Treasury Management Strategy will form part of the budget papers for Council in February. However, the report notes that some of the figures are still provisional, as at the time of writing this report, the final budget recommendations, including the capital investment strategy, were still being drafted. However, with that said, we are not expecting any changes to impact the overall strategy or framework the Council operates in its Treasury management activities. The actual strategy is set out on an appendix to the report, and it covers various elements which are prescribed in terms of setting a strategy of our investment management activities. The report is broken down into various sections. As normal, there is an economic update and commentary by our Treasury advisors, Arlene Close, in Appendix B. However, this is quite technical, and I wasn't going to go into it in too much detail. But obviously, we're all aware in the media of the increase in inflation, obviously increase in base rate, which is obviously impacting our Treasury management activities. If we move on to the local context in Section 4, this provides details of our capital financing requirement, which outlines the Council's borrowing need over the medium term, the level of external borrowing which is required, and details the level of resources that underpin the level of funds that we can invest. Table 1 on page 64 of your packs give a balance sheet summary. Now, although the figures are still draft, there are two areas that I'll draw your attention to. Firstly is our external borrowing. In previous years, the Council has embarked on a significant capital programme, and some of that has been funded by external borrowing. At this moment in time, we haven't actually externalised that borrowing, and we've used internal borrowing as we've had high cash balances. However, in the coming years, we're expecting to borrow for some of these schemes, and that's reflected in an increase in borrowing over the next 3 to 4 years. The second point on that table is in regards to our short-term investments. As you're aware, we have had high cash balances over the last few years, given the large government support. However, as we are repaying this money or has paid it out, obviously our balances are coming back to a normal level. So as you can see, we are seeing a significant drop in our investments over the next 3 to 4 years. But obviously that is coming back to a normality before the global pandemic. Section 5 covers our borrowing strategy. And for those present at the last committee, obviously we discussed about refinancing our lender option, borrowing option loans with a equal instalment principal of loan from the PWB. Now, currently the Council holds a loan value of around 5.8 million. When we consider the strategy, there's a variety of sources that the Council can borrow from, including the Treasury, which is the PWB lending facility, other financial institutions, banks, building societies, and other UK public bodies, such as other local authorities. However, given the fluctuation in the markets, obviously any decision on whether we borrow short-term or long-term will be assessed at the time. One other point obviously to make in regards to our borrowing is members are aware that in previous committees that government has been tightening up their arrangements for borrowing from them. So obviously the Council cannot borrow primarily for yield. In such circumstances, the Council could potentially lose the ability to borrow from the PWB, which is something that we will need to avoid. And obviously, as part of our budget plans for 23-24 onwards, there is no icon there that potentially could hinder us from borrowing from the PWB. Our Treasury investments is in Section 6, which deals with our anticipated investments. Table 3 on page 67 provides a draft estimate on our average investment balances. And as I said previously, we are expecting our balances to drop over the next 3 years. As part of our strategy, the Council's objective is to ensure the Council's investments remain secure and liquid, and therefore we will seek security and liquid over the investment yield that we could actually obtain. Table 4 on page 68 provides a list of Council's investments counterparties, which obviously will remain unchanged from last year. The vast majority of our short-term investments have been in money markets, which obviously we can withdraw the next day, or with the UK Treasury via the Debt Management Office, which usually is for less than 100 days. and that was likely to continue in 23-24. The strategy then goes on with additional commentary on our investments on counterparties and expands further on how we manage risk. I won't go into detail on these aspects of the report. However, it covers such as investment limits, our credit ratings, and investments beyond a year. The report goes on to financial implications in section 9. The proposed budget income for 23-24 is 1.3 million, based on an average investment portfolio of 36 million and an interest rate of 3%. With regards to a borrowing, from refinancing our lender option borrowings and loans earlier in May last year, borrowings around 143k a year, and obviously we still have a premium of 70k a year in regards to refinancing our LOBOs. However, as stated, we are forecasting that council may need to borrow externally in the coming years, which could result in £405,000 a year using the equal instalment principal basis. However, that is dependent on timing. And also this anticipated cost is already included as part of the council's budget. Now, those were the key points I wanted to highlight, but I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Mark. Members, we're asked to consider this report and recommend its submission to full council. So do any members wish to speak on this item? Councillor Mann.
Mark referred to the sort of paragraph that jumped out at me, and that's the sort of the Arlington Close report, the first paragraph on page 74. The sort of the context in which we find ourselves: higher inflation, higher interest rates, uncertain government policy, and deteriorating economic outlook. I mean, that's a pretty monstrous background at which we've got to set the budget, and I think it's entirely likely that at some stage external borrowing will go up. I don't think we'll be surprised by that. I think it's virtually sort of built in, just given the context, unless it is being exaggerated, but it does seem to mesh in with all the other national stuff that we've been sort of reading, so it probably is going to be sound. So it looks like we're going to have to batten down those hatches.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Euston.
Thank you, Chair. Mark referred to the table 3 on page 67. When I read it earlier today, I made a comment as to why are we forecasting such a big drop in short-term investments, and I was curious to know if it was because Horizon 120 was coming to the end and we were getting our money back with profits, or whether it was a conscious decision because of the economic climate to borrow less and therefore invest less, or are we returning to what is a normal level of short-term investments for this authority? Thanks.
Yes, it would be the latter of your points. Basically, we have been holding a large chunk of government funding, and obviously there is a time lag from when we actually receive it and when we pay it out. And obviously in 21-22, you can see obviously short-term investments is around 41 million. This year, we're forecasting around 37. But obviously, by that time, the majority of the COVID grants have been paid out. Any residual will be paid back to government, and obviously any collection fund balances will also be paid to pre-setting authorities. So we are going back to our normal levels of investments.
Do any members wish to speak? Thank you. So, members, we're also asked to consider if we wish to propose any amendments to the strategy or provide any other comments. So, do any members wish to propose any amendments to the strategy? Thank you. So can I take it that the report has been recommended to full council, and please indicate by a show of hands. Thank you, members. We have considered and recommended this report to full council, and I will now proceed to agenda item 8, which is our fraud update. So members, the report for this item is set out on pages 78 to 88 of the agenda, and please can I invite Angie Mitchell, our Audit, Insurance and Fraud Manager, to set out the report.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So the first few paragraphs of this report give a flavour of the extent of fraud affecting the economy. Goes on to give a description of some fraud risks and national developments, and also council counter-fraud arrangements. So if I then revert to some of the arrangements that we engage in relation to counter-fraud, paragraph 3.5 on page 83 explains data matching, the national arrangements and also local arrangements. So these are used proactively as picking things up before they occur as well. And again, the business grant fraud activity, there are a number of proactive checks by the Revenues and Benefits team to pick things up at the start before grants were paid. So additionally, in terms of fraud arrangements, the audit team also conducted an audit of fraud risks relating to council tax and NDR. This was reported to a previous meeting of this committee, and the audit was given a full assurance rating with no recommendations. There are a number of policies referred to in paragraph 3.7.1 and 3.7.2. Some of these are due for review, and we are working on those. Chairman, that's a brief summary of the report, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Angie. Do any members wish to speak on this item? Councillor Mann.
The BDO report clearly states
Sorry, Councillor Mann, could you just have your microphone? Thank you.
I apologise, yeah. The BDO report clearly states that no fraud has been detected, which is always a really good thing to hear. But these very sort of large sums of money, business grants for COVID, and the fuel arrangements. Now, according to the sort of national press, there's been a lot of scope for fraud there, with fake firms sort of being set up purely with the intention of claiming solid monies and multiple individual applications for sort of the fuel allowance and so on. What's the sort of the Braintree situation as part of this wider picture? Is there any evidence that it is happening sort of here as well? If so, what sort of sums are likely to be concerned, and how are these fraud cases reported? Who are they reported to? Does the council ever get to, or particularly the councillors, ever get to know about them? I just wondered where we were in this point of time. You like my questions.
Councillor Mann, I'm grateful to you for your question. Thank you. So the paragraphs 3.6.2 and 3.6.3 give an outline of some of the checks that were conducted on applications. So these were conducted before the grants were paid to reduce the risk of fraud going through the system. So they're upfront checks to prevent it. I haven't got figures of the applications that were stopped at that stage because of concerns being raised, but we can explore that and report back to you.
It would be interesting to know. I mean, it's really impressive, all the anti-fraud measures that are here. Very, very sort of comprehensive. It's difficult to know what more you could do, but people are very cunning and can quite often, defeat the best prepared. So I'm just interested to know at some future date about where we stand.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Is that something that you'll be able to provide at a future meeting, Angie?
Yes, I'll talk to the Revenues and Benefits team and see what we can pull out for you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My question is about housing benefit or overpayments, and I do appreciate from the report on page 83, I think it is, that it's a matter for the Department of Work and Pensions, but I was curious and perhaps a bit concerned that if I read the figures correctly, it's gone from 84,000, just over, in the previous financial year to 9 months of the subsequent year to 169,000, which, if grossed up, might be over £200,000. Now, while it's not our responsibility, these are public funds. Can you comment on that apparently very large increase?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Walsh. The investigation environment has changed significantly between the 21-22 year and where we are now in terms of the ability to conduct interviews under caution and so on. So we're in much better placed to proceed with investigative activity and identify those. The officer will have obviously done a lot of background work during 21-22 and potentially save some cases until he was able to conduct full interviews under caution and to proceed with more robust investigation where it was appropriate. So we're returning now more to where we were pre-pandemic in terms of that. Does that help?
Yeah, would you like to come back? Yeah.
Quick follow-up. No, that's helpful. Are you suggesting that perhaps there was more in the previous year which hadn't been picked up, or something else?
So I think the investigation activity continues, and some of those cases will have been, these are closed cases, so some of those cases would have been worked on but not concluded until the current financial year.
Thank you. Councillor Raymond.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to ask the same question, but it got asked by Councillor Walsh. So, but I would like to make a comment. A very informative report. It highlights all the areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Raymond. Did anybody else wish to speak on this item? Okay, members, we're asked to note this report, so please indicate by a show of hands. Thank you, members. The report is noted, and I will now proceed to agenda item 9, our internal audit plan. So this report is set out on pages 89 to 99 of the agenda, and again, can I please invite Angie Mitchell to set out her report?
Thank you, Chair. So this is the standard update to the committee on the work completed in respect of the audit plan since the last report to the committee. Paragraph 3.1.2 identifies 4 reports which have been completed since the last report, which was in November. Planning audit achieved significant assurance, community safeguarding and safety and safeguarding partnerships, and the review of the Constitution achieved full assurance, and an audit of CCTV GDPR compliance was a limited assurance review. A summary of the outcomes of these audits is in Appendix 2 to this report. The report also identifies factors affecting completion of planned work. We reported last time the resignation of one of the team, and I'm pleased to report that an appointment has now been made, and we expect the new recruit to start in February. obviously there's reduced resource to complete the work in the plans, so we will look at the highest areas of priority with a view to achieving sufficient work to enable me to give an opinion at the end of the year. We've also noted we've been looking for an external quality assessment provider, so we have now made an appointment in that respect, and the external quality assessment will take place next month, and members of this committee have been invited to participate. The report also gives an update on RIPA and IPA applications. So there have been no applications in 2023 to the date of producing this report. We're currently working on the annual statistics for the Investigatory Powers Commissioner's Office. So they're currently being compiled, but again, we anticipate a nil return in respect of the number of applications in 2022. Appendix 1 just gives a summary of the audit plan and the progress against the plan. And again, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, does anybody wish to speak? I would just like to ask a quick question, if that's okay. You mentioned that there have been 4 audits since the last committee, and 3 of those read very pleasingly, either receiving full assurance or significant assurance. There is one, however, that had limited assurance. So could you just give some kind of confidence to the committee about maybe any actions that have taken place since the audit took place, and whether we're on track to get more confidence around that audit? I think it was regarding CCTV with GDPR compliance as well.
Yes, of course. So the officers concerned have been on this straight away. In respect of the updated body-worn video policy, I've received a draft to review for that, and actions are in progress for the rest of it. So whilst in terms of the findings of the audit, it was a limited assurance outcome, the direction of travel is very strong.
Thank you. Councillor Euston.
Yeah, I know Angie would be very disappointed if I didn't ask questions about limited assurance, because I finally got to grips with what it means, which I'm sure she'll be delighted. But my question relates to, I think it's Appendix 2, follow-up reviews and an update. And these were where reviews were done into various things over previous years, and limited assurance was the outcome for most of them. So there was Manor Street in 2019, housing application documents and so on. And if I'm reading it correctly, there are updates to updates. And so are we moving really from limited to significant, or better still, full assurance on those items that were previously identified? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Euston. Yes, we're moving from a position of significant or limited assurance at the time of the audit to completing the recommendations, and this is an ongoing report to give you an update on where we are with those recommendations. In particular, there is reference to Manor Street, and the committee has received a previous update from the corporate director on implementation of actions relating to that, but there's also an independent audit review in progress to give you some assurance on completion of those recommendations as well as some other work on major contracts. So yes, it's just giving you an ongoing update on where we are.
Thank you, members. If there are no further questions, we have been asked to note the internal audit update, including progress against the internal audit plan for 2022-23. So can I take it that the report has been noted, and please indicate by a show of hands? Thank you, members. The report has been noted, and I will now proceed to agenda item 12, urgent business. I think you'll be pleased to know that there is no urgent business this evening. So this item concludes our business for this evening, and I will therefore close this meeting of the Governance and Audit Scrutiny Committee at 8:25. So thank you, members, for your attendance, and again thank you, officers, for your attendance too, and those watching on the YouTube broadcast. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.